Now we get a chance to talk to a man who is in charge of a whole lot, as SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey will join us in just a few minutes, as he has made the media rounds, the media tour. A man who is very, very in the want and in the know is certainly going to have a whole lot to bestow upon us here in Atlanta. Commissioner Sankey, we thank you for joining us here in Atlanta, here on 680 The Fan. How you doing this fine Wednesday?
I appreciate the invitation. I noticed the U.S. mail cap is like Karl Malone delivering or something today.
Stetson Bennett.
Okay, is that his nickname?
He delivered an interview and also a championship around here, so we had a little fun with that. Talk about overall what you've seen. You have a whole lot on your plate with the season already getting ready to start. You have to talk about realignment. You have to talk about, people wanting to call and join. What is number one on your plate of all the things that are coming in at one time as you get ready to start 2022's NFL or SEC season this year?
Preparing for the year ahead, so we never want to be caught off guard by doing the fundamentals really well, and it's almost like a football coaching explanation. So we have to be fully prepared for the season when it kicks off. We actually have our soccer teams coming back for the start of their practice in just a couple of weeks, actually ahead of the football teams. They start play in early August, so making sure all of our fundamentals are covered. So that starts at the top, and then for us, the growth to 16 and the scheduling discussion follows quickly behind. So we've got some late summer discussions on that issue. That doesn't mean we'll be in a matter of concluding things. The membership issue popped up surprisingly on us in late June, and all of a sudden that gets inserted into everything else. So it's not as if you can just ignore what you have to do on a day-to-day basis. You just spend more time trying to figure out how to separate fact from fiction and what that means for us. Long term, there then are a set of issues. What are you going to do with the college football playoff? How does the NCAA function effectively? How do we continue to deal with some of the business opportunities presented to us? I could probably go on, but I'd start with that kind of ranking of priorities. We need to be prepared for the year ahead.
We talk about the general manager or an athletic director on the college end of it, general manager, pro athletic director in college, that they have a wish list. Now, maybe it was in the old days written on a piece of paper, you lock it in a drawer. If this guy ever becomes available, I'd like to hire him. If this person ever becomes a free agent, I'd like to go after him. Do you have that in mind when you think about if I could set up the perfect SEC conference? Have you thought about teams, specific teams that would really make the SEC as close to perfect as possible? Do you let your mind sort of, especially now in a world where it does feel like the Wild Wild West, if you can dream it, you can do it. Do you have a wish list, a want list?
I did it a year ago, so I thought that was a pretty good move by going to 16. What I don't do is focus on a number. And I think that's where you make mistakes. If you let the wrong priority lead you, that's where you make errors. And for instance, in life, and I think even in this work, money doesn't lead, it follows. So if you make really good decisions for really good reasons, then you'll be successful financially. And to that point, if we were to ever think about growth, and it's not at the forefront of our minds, but we're obviously attentive to what's happening around us, the culture fit and the philosophical approach to how the university supports athletics programs is at the forefront of our thinking. To the extent that Texas and Oklahoma came, they said, hey, we've watched how you guys have made decisions, how you've led, what you've achieved, and how you support your athletic programs, and we realized we want to be a part of that.
Over under. 5 schools not members of the SEC right now have called about becoming members of the SEC.
Over.
10.
Over.
20.
Under.
Okay, so we're between 10 and 20. Does the phone call directly come to you?
No.
Or is there? Okay, so what's the what's the chain of command? What's the kind of the rightest way to maybe have? And look, it's hard to keep a secret now. That's the other thing too. There aren't a lot of secrets that are kept, so you got to be careful. I'm assuming.
Well, to be clear, nobody's called and said I want to join now. It is, hey, what are you guys thinking about the future? And that could come to a member of my staff, to an athletics director, from a colleague, could come to me. And, we're not recruiting. Nobody's applying. It's just, wow, the world's changing. We want to be We want to make sure we're out here and okay, well, we've got open lines of communication.
Do you have my number is basically the question, right? Do you have their number? Because there might be somewhere down the road where you might want to make a phone call.
It's probably less intriguing. It's just, hey, the world's changing. What do you think about the future?
All right. I got to do the obligatory. So if we have 16 at some point, we will. Do you believe divisions are here to stay in the SEC?
No. In fact, we can have them in some sports and not others. We've done that before. So baseball has divisions. Basketball does not. Football has divisions. Soccer does not. I take that back. Let me go back and say,
okay.
Baseball has divisions. Basketball does not. Football has divisions. Basketball is not. I'm confident in that. In football, we focus on the single division model going forward. So we could still have divisions, but our discussions have focused on a single division of 16 teams. The question is going to be number of permanent opponents, so annually played games, and then every other game will be played biannually. And over a 2-year time, you'll see everybody instead of over a 6-year time. And over a 4-year time, you'll see everybody home and away rather than over a 12-year time.
SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey joining us here on the Fan 680 93.7 FM. If you could put a number on it, I was talking to Kirby Smart. We were talking to Kirby Smart about it. NIL conversations, started last year, so we're already in year 2. Nobody has convened a committee yet, so year 3, as of right now, there are no guardrails. What do you think it will take to get an NIL committee convened either in the SEC or nationally, and how long do you surmise you think that would take?
Well, there have been NIL committees, actually. So we were very clear in 2019 about how we viewed the onset of name, image, and likeness activity, particularly in light of California introducing state legislation first, and that's multiplied. And one of the things we said up front is we don't want a patchwork of state laws dictating the onset of name, image, likeness. Well, people didn't want to listen to that, and it happened that way. We talked about other elements in recruiting. There's now a group that the Division I Board of Directors under the NCAA's appointed to look at NIL guidance again. So there's yet another committee looking at the issue. On this issue, just convening a conference committee is unsatisfactory because then you're going to argue with like 6 people. So you can argue among 14.
Better question, when do you think...
So I'm just going to argue among 14 when we talk about it. So that's our full conference committee.
Better question, when do you think there will be some guardrails in place, or there could be?
Well, that depends on who's willing to act. I've referenced, and others have referenced, the need for us to have a national standard to conduct college sports. And there are other reasons for that, like a young person being recruited in 10 different states shouldn't have to figure out 10 different state laws. Or if there's no state law, figuring out different institutional policy. That's unfair to a high school junior or senior. We also don't have consumer protections for people who are signing agreements we know nothing about. People have to hear that, and to have a national standard would require congressional action. The NCAA can't solve the problem because it will become restrictive and then put universities in conflict with state laws, which is not an effective way to administer. If we're not able to be persuasive, or Congress opts to not engage in problem solving around this issue, then we're going to be back to states again to see if in at least our current 11, soon to be 12 states, we could establish uniformity.
So I can quote you to 2065, and then we'll have some guardrails in place.
Well, people have said you never want to go to Congress, and I don't want to go to Congress, but the state-by-state onset, and a number of states have pulled back from their legislation initially, and the legal environment, and some decisions made not to pursue litigation against states that adopted name, image, and likeness laws independently. All that puts us into the congressional conversation.
I enjoyed the over-under game. Do you have a number in mind if I say how many schools can realistically win the national championship?
In our league?
Not in your league. Big pick. There's 130 schools.
Oh.
Is it supposed to be 130?
I don't know if I have the sophistication of thought.
Is it supposed to be 130? I don't want to. Okay, I'm going to ask. Is 130 too many?
In FBS?
Yes.
I don't think that's our fundamental problem.
You don't? So chasing the tail when you're a lesser, and you know you're a lesser. So if I say there's 10 schools that go in a national championship, you might tell me I'm wrong, but that's the number I think is realistic. That means 120 quite honestly can't. And you're going to chase your tail with a private plane, and you're going to actually get in debt. You're not going to make money. It's insane to me. It's a terrible business model for a lot of schools in that regard.
Well, so let's take a step back. Okay. People have to define success. So I'll receive a lot more calls from people asking this question. Hey, so-and-so has an athletics director's job open. Can you help me get this job, get in the mix? And I'll say, and you need to take a step back, because I think you need to go through some evaluation points, one of which, and there are usually 5, one of which is they need to explain, if you're going to put your career on the line with them, how they define success. So in those 130, there are more than 10 that would say, we want to win a national championship. I'll freely acknowledge that. There are others who say, you know what, we want to compete within our conference context. And if we do that really well from time to time, maybe you can jump up and be in a national consideration. And so that's all about expectation setting. And then the question is, how much money is there beneath that vision, and do they connect? Like, I had a basketball coach who coached in the Metro Atlantic Conference, the old Conference USA, so now it would be the Big East, and then I was commissioner of the Southland Conference. And he said, when I was in the Metro Atlantic Conference, and people can't see the visual, but expectations were here and resources were here. So the connection between expectations and resources wasn't exact, but it's pretty good. Then when I went into this smaller Big East school, the expectations were here, national championship level, but the resources were elevated. And then he came to the school in the Southland Conference. He said, you know what, expectations are at the Big East level, and the resources are below the Metro Atlantic level, and that's the lack of attachment to reality that does create threats. But those decisions are made locally by presidents, by boards, by boosters. One can question the wisdom of that. In my league, we had 6 teams win the national championship in the last 25 years. So you say, well, how many people can win the national championship? I had a colleague from another conference in the last 3 weeks who said, the great thing about your league is Ole Miss can look around and say, we're not competing, make an adjustment, and they're in the Sugar Bowl with 10 wins a few years later. You know, Mississippi State can go hire Mike Leach. Arkansas, who had struggled, goes to the Outback Bowl, beats a Big Ten member. So here's a place where the resources and the expectations can fit. As you expand the conference, you challenge people to access a conference championship, but that's part of competition. And I think people understand that, and they want to challenge themselves in this way.
Is the NCAA, as we big picture know it, done?
I don't know that it's done. I think we have, and I've said this to presidents, a responsibility to try to make it work. The question is, can it adapt to work in a modern era? And I think that's a question that's to be answered. And so the answer to is it done is going to depend on its entity and its leadership's ability to adapt to the realities around us.
Is there something realistic that could take its place? We were talking about a czar of college football with a committee below, where the NCAA is not that building up in Indianapolis. It's different. Now, I'd imagine you don't want to be unbridled, but is there a way to set up a system that would be better?
Yeah, so the way I look at it, the czar, so we'll start there, and I'll go through a couple things. The czars don't work very well. You ask the Russian people that, or ask, like, the war on drugs in the 80s. We had a drug czar, and what do we have? We have drug problems.
Still have Russians.
In the 2020s, and we still have Russian aggression, I guess.
You had attempted coups and people in statues.
So the second part of that is you're really asking a question about, will we all just delegate full authority someplace else?
Right.
And I don't believe we will right now. This conference. So this conference wants to collaborate, but if you go back to COVID year, there's some lessons there about connection and trust. So there were some people who just said, I'm done, I'm out. And what we said is, we're going to keep trying. And we want to be the keep trying conference. And the subjecting that effort to somebody else's whim is not something that's on our agenda. Now, I'd also submit to the third point, we wouldn't just do something in football. So there are those who say you should take football out of the NCAA and just run it on its own. How do I look a basketball player in the eye and say, look, we can do A, B, and C for football, but we can't do it for you because we're in the NCAA structure? Or we just went through the baseball College World Series. We had 25,000 people at games, which is bigger than basketball at that time of year. And we got first-round draft picks. How do I look that person in the eye and say, I'm sorry, we can do things for football, but we can't do it for you as a baseball player, even though you're projected to be a first-round draft pick? Or right now, the World Championships in track and field. Nobody writes about one-and-dones in track and field, but we have them. Incredibly talented people. Same question. How do I look them in the eye and say, well, I can't do certain support things for you because you're in the NCAA structure? So I think the discussion about just take football out is way too narrow and fails to capture the big picture. And the big picture is we need to see if we can make this NCAA thing work, but it has to adapt. The people that are comfortable with everything that they're used to in Division I, just because they wanted to be Division I, are going to have to adapt. And we're going to have to adapt. And if we can't, that has larger long-term implications.
All right, I know you got to grow. How does it feel to be the best conference in the country?
Awesome. So, we don't win everything. We want to. Like, I created a vision in 2015 where it said we want to graduate every student athlete. We want to win every championship, because when you do those two things, people pay attention and you have impact upon the world. Guy that was just sitting in this chair before me, Benjamin Watson, that's a big impact based on who he is as a person and as a leader and as an athlete. And we want to magnify that type of influence.
Well, we certainly thank you for your time. Very candid and very informative, and we look forward to seeing how things are going to progress this year and in the years to come. But the SEC is certainly cream of the crop when it comes to college football, and you, sir, are a big part of that. We thank you for your time.
I know you got to run it. You enjoying it?
Yeah. This
you
is
enjoy all of this, the business part of it, the emotional part of it.
It's not always fun. You know, it's like people say, do you have fun in your job? And not near as much as I used to. I mean, it's work. And if you saw a picture of me in 2015 when I started versus now, I see that every so often. The gray hair is multiplied, and the hair that was there is now absent. So I'm catching you. Yeah. And the sleep patterns are very different.
Fight the fight, though. Fight the fight.
No,
you got a little bit more in you.
I just visited with someone who's an alum who played women's basketball here. And you walk out of that and you're like, you know what? We're doing something right. And I wasn't commissioner when Benjamin played, but we're doing something right. You watch Stetson Bennett down there. We're doing something right. You meet Alabama's quarterback who won the Heisman Trophy. We're doing something right. Ole Miss baseball College World Series. Last team in. To be on that field and experience that joy, we're doing something right. And so we need to keep doing the things right. We're going to have problems, but we do a lot right.
Still have a great head of hair. Next time you're in Atlanta, I'll take you to my barber. We'll get a haircut.
Okay, a deal. Because I haven't seen a barber in a while. My wife had to help me out in advance of this week because I was away.
You knew it was going to be photo ops, podiums, and all that stuff.
I said, be careful back there. I can't see it.
But you have to worry about what color tie you wear?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I realized Mark Stoops is next to introduce. Is that right? And I've got Kentucky blue embedded in my green tie. So swing and a miss there by the commissioner.
Well, we all make mistakes, but you've made more right decisions than that. We look forward to talking to you down the road. Thank you so much for your time, Commissioner. Commissioner Greg Sankey of the SEC joining us here on the Fan 680 93.7 FM.